What is going on, guys? Welcome to your, 67th C++ tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to read custom data. So in the last tutorial, what we did is, let me scroll to my desktop, Watermelon. We created this player's text file, and what it did is basically allowed us to create our own custom file structure. And what we did is we were making our computer game with a bunch of different players. We gave them an integer as the ID number, a name, which was a string, and their bank account, which was of course a double. So now we have all our data right here, and it's laid out in a very specific way. No other program could really understand what this data is used for except our program. So now that we have that data, we need to be able to read it specifically in our own custom way. So it's a little bit different than writing it for a couple of reasons, which I'm going to be talking about. So the first thing I want to stress to you guys is you can't use OF stream. OF is for outputting data to a stream. For example, when you have text and you want to output it to a file or write it to a file. Whenever you want to read data in from a file, you need IF stream. This allows you to take data from a file and read it into, the computer's memory or whatever. So it's the opposite of OF stream. OF is for writing data to a file. IF is for reading data from a file. So then you go ahead and create your file object. I'm just going to name mine the file. And then, of course, is a constructor, optional constructor. It can take the name of that file. So players.text was the name of that file. Again, you can either create the text file document, or excuse me, what am I going to say? The file object on one line of code or break it up into two. I always like to put it on one line of code, just like when we were writing to a file. So aside from that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading the data from that document. So remember, that document had 3 pieces of information in it. On each row it had an ID number, a name, and the amount of money. So let's go ahead and make variables to hold that data. Int ID, and then we'll make string name to store their name, and double money to store their, bank account information. So basically, how we're going to do that is this. We're going to create a while loop, and the while loop is going to loop through each piece of information, whether it's their ID number, their name, or their money, and it's going to store it in a variable. And whenever we have that information stored in the variables, we can do, whatever we want with it. We can load it into our computer game. We can just go ahead and print it out on the screen. We can go ahead and send it to a database on the internet. But basically, what we have to do first is take that data from the file, and we need to store it on variables in our program. So I want to talk to you guys about how we're going to do this. Remember I said in the last tutorial that every file has end of file marker, and C++ pretty much is going to run this program until it gets to the end of file marker, and then when it gets to the end, it's going to return something called a null pointer. So let me go ahead and actually code this, and then I can explain what I'm talking about. So just like before, whenever we were, whenever you use like CIN to get information from the keyboard, and then you could store it in variables like this, well, now we're getting information from the file. So we go ahead and type the file, and that's where the information is coming from, and we're going to store an ID, the first piece of information, and the second piece of information we're going to store in name, and the third piece of information we're going to store in money. So it's basically going to loop through this while loop, and it's going to look at the file each time, and every time it gets to a new piece of information, it's going to store an ID, name, and money. Now, let me say this. Whenever you're working with files, there's something called a file pointer. And let me go ahead and open my document again, and I could probably show it to you guys really easily. Where's it? Watermelon players. So whenever you're working with files, you have something called a file pointer. Now the job of this file pointer is to keep track of where in the file C++ is working with. So what it's going to do is this file pointer, let me go ahead and skinny up my program a little bit, is going to start at the very beginning. And by the way, the end of file pointer is what right there where my cursor is. But anyways, your file pointer always starts at the very beginning. What this loop is going to do right now is it's going to read the first piece of information. So it's going to see right there, that's the first piece of information. that number 1 right there is what I want to store in ID. So next it says, alright, this next piece of information store in name. So it's going to scroll, the file pointer is going to go to this next piece of information, and it's going to see this one right here, Bucky, should be stored in name. And then it's going to say, alright, now the next piece of information, which is this right here, I'm supposed to store this in the variable money. So that's what's going to happen the first time this program loops through. So the next time it loops through, the file pointer is going to be right here. So that's why we didn't have to change any line of code right here, because we're working with the same object, yet it knows the next piece of information is this too, because the file pointer, the next time this loop runs, is going to be at the beginning of the next line, or at the end of this line, pretty much the same spot. So that is how the file pointer is going to be working. And by the way, it actually is called the file pointer, so you know I'm not making that up. So that's why this loop is going to run fine each time. So now that we have the correct pieces of information stored in ID, name, and money, we can just go ahead and, if we were making a game or something, we would want to load them into the game. But for now, let's just go ahead and print them out on the screen. So cout, print out ID, and then go ahead and I'm going to make a comma separated list instead of, spaces, because, if you're working with Excel, well, never mind. They use comma separated list, but anyways, I just like how it looks. So the next piece of information is name, and I'm just going to add a comma right there. And lastly, what is it? Money. So after this, I'm just going to go ahead and end that line, and whenever you run this program, it should work just fine. So what it did is it read that file from the text file, 1 Bucky 65.47, and it did what we wanted with it. And in this case, what we wanted to do with it is just output it on the screen. So we said, alright, now that we have the information, output the ID, and then a comma, and then Bucky, and then a comma, and then money, and then end of the line. So it goes to a new line. So then, where this is working in the file is, it's at the end of the file, so whenever you run this loop again, the next ID it jumps down to is number 2. It runs the entire loop, it's at the end of that line, and then whenever you run this loop again, it jumps down to the ID number 3, and it runs that line of code. And how does this while loop know when to stop? Because whenever the end of file marker has been reached, C++ knows already, without us having to type any extra code, that a null pointer is returned. Basically, it changes this boolean to false. So whenever this is working, this is true. Whenever it gets to the end of file, C++ already knows that this loop should be false. We don't have to explicitly, write an if statement in here to check it or anything. It's one of the cool features with C++. It automatically knows when to end. So that's one cool thing that we don't have to worry about. Another cool thing that we don't have to worry about is whenever we're working with this ifstream or ofstream object, whenever the file reaches the end of the file and this goes to false, this object is going to get deleted automatically in the deconstructor. Remember when we talked about constructors and deconstructor? The deconstructor is going to call the close file method. So remember, like in the first file tutorial, I told you guys that you need to close your files in order to free up resources. Well, what this ifstream deconstructor is going to do is, as soon as this file object gets deleted, this file is going to close automatically. So that's two things we don't have to worry about. Whenever we get to the end of file, this is going to go to false, and the loop is going to end automatically. And also, whenever it gets to the end of file, the deconstructor is going to close the file automatically, so we don't have to explicitly write the file .close. So pretty much everything is handed to you. You just gotta remember how to use it. C++ made it really, really simple to work with files if you really think about it. You don't have to do all the background stuff. So there you go. That's how you write and read a custom file. And again, your file structure is going to be different depending on the type of application you make, but that's the basics of it. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I know you guys probably have a lot of questions. Just ask me on my forum, thenewboston.com/forum. And I'm going to go to McDonald's, get an extra large milkshake, and well, check out my next video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you then.